In this video, I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of Android. So many of you have already interacted with an Android device at one point in time or another. But nonetheless, I just wanted to give you an overview as to what exactly Android is. And maybe some nitty-gritty stuff that you didn't necessarily know about before we start developing applications. Some stuff that you want to maybe keep in back your mind when we go ahead and start developing, like I said, our applications. So let's go ahead and move on. And so what is Android? Well, Android is a mobile operating system currently developed by Google. Android is open source, and that open source mentality is what allows HTC, Samsung, Motorola, all these guys to actually take Android and go ahead and modify, and that's why we have different versions of Android running on each one of those different hardware manufacturers, right? Because Google actually encourages them to do that. Google always allows lone developers to go ahead and modify Android and release that to people as well, right? All this stuff is encouraged by Google. That's what this open source mentality means. Great. So Android architecture is roughly divided into 5 sections: listing up Linux kernel, native libraries, Android runtime, application frameworks, and then lastly applications. So now let's go ahead and actually break down each one of those layers in our Android architecture. So our Linux kernel interacts with the Android hardware and contains all the essential hardware drivers. It also provides abstraction layer, or rather an abstraction layer between software and hardware. So this is the very basis of Android, right? This kind of as it says, the kernel, right? It's kind of a nucleus eventually. This is what everything else is built of. So our libraries are core proven libraries that handle specific types of data. Some examples include SQLite, Surface Manager, Media Framework, WebKit, and OpenGL. So these are kind of libraries that have been tested and person in other thing that Android has bundled with its operating system that we interact with, right? So for example, SQLite is a library that allows us to manage or interact with databases very effectively, right? Our WebKit that I mentioned allows us to render web pages in an efficient manner and all that kind of good stuff. OpenGL is used to render second and third graphics. Great. So let's move on. Android runtime and the type of Java virtual machine used in Android to run Android application. It's optimizing for low processing power and low memory environments. So I don't know how many of you know this already, but Java uses something called a job virtual machine that takes bytecode and it goes and translates that using Java virtual machine. Well, Android has taken a specific job virtual machine, as I said, that's optimized for low processing power and low memory environments, which is really good when we are dealing with mobile devices, right? Because with mobile devices, we don't have a lot of processing power and we don't have a lot of memory, right? So they, as I said, they kind of grabbed a custom virtual machine and they bundled with Android to make it more efficient. So our application framework is building blocks that our application directly interact with. So these programs manage basic functions of the phone, such as phone calls and resource management. And these are the tools or the blocks that we are going to go ahead and grab and utilize when you are working with or building our application. So say we want to go ahead and make an application that deals with managing phone calls. Well, we go ahead and we grab the package for phone management that Androids include, or maybe we want to interact with the location right of an Android device. We go ahead and we grab the location package. Great. So that's what our application framework is. It's essentially these little bundle packages that deal with specific portions of our device. So lastly, we have our application. Our application are programs that utilize all the above to create new functionality for devices. So that's where we come in, right? That's where we go ahead and actually program specific functionality, which is later called an application. So now let's actually see how all of these things are visualized. So I'm going to move on here. So you'll notice at the very bottom, as I said, we have the Linux kernel. And the Linux kernel, as I said, interacts with all of the hardware, right? It provides a layer of abstraction with the hardware. So you'll notice that that's our lowest layer, right? That's the layer that all of the other layers rely on, and that's our layer that's in the red there. So right above that we have our libraries that we talked about, which, as I said, are libraries that have been proven and tested and are included with Android. So we have the OpenGL WebKit, that's that green portion. Right of the end right is our Android runtime. That's that runtime that, as I said, it is optimized for low power and low memory situations, right? Great. So above that we have our application framework, which, as I said, allows us to interact with the location of our phone, or our the telephony manager, which is how we make phone calls and manage all the kind of good stuff. That's the little packages or blocks that we are going to go ahead and grab, interact with when we want to do any of these specific types of things. So that's the blue portion right off to the right above a green portion, and then right above that is the applications. Those are all the things that we are going to create. You'll notice that it says home, contacts, phones, and browser. Those are default applications that Google has actually, or Android I should say, has actually already created for us. So that was a brief overview of Android, guys. I hope you learned something and you actually have a greater understanding of how everything is working together now.